China is preparing military bases around the world. According to U.S. intelligence, China might get one on the Atlantic coast of Afrika. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by PC Doctor Toolbox. Protect your PC from software crashes, hardware failures, the kind of glitches that make your life miserable. So, for all China's talk about a peaceful rise, it has big plans to expand its military reach into Africa. China already has its first overseas military base here, in Djibouti. It's just 6 miles from a U.S. base. The location is strategic, overlooking a key choke point for maritime traffic going to and from the Suez Canal. If you think toilet paper was hard to find when the Suez Canal was temporarily blocked back in March, imagine what it'll be like if the Chinese military decides to block it off permanently. Start hoarding now. Anyway, according to classified American intelligence reports, China is well on its way to building its first military base along the Atlantic Ocean. U.S. intelligence believes it will be here, in Equatorial Guinea. There's already a Chinese-built deep-water commercial port in Bata, Equatorial Guinea's largest city. Supposedly, the port in Bata is a civilian port, but according to U.S. officials who spoke to the Wall Street Journal, U.S. intelligence reports raise the prospect that Chinese warships would be able to rearm and refit opposite the east coast of the U.S. because of the location of Equatorial Guinea. The U.S. has already been frantically trying to rein in China's military expansion. Recently, China signed a secret agreement with Cambodia to allow the Chinese Navy access to their military port. And earlier this year, U.S. intelligence discovered China was building a secret military base in a Chinese-run commercial port in the United Arab Emirates. But China has a major foothold in Africa, and the U.S. is struggling to deal with it. I'll tell you why after the break. Welcome back. According to U.S. intelligence, China is attempting to build its first military base on Africa's Atlantic coast. Again, most likely that will be in Equatorial Guinea. The Pentagon knows that's a big problem. Back in April, General Stephen Townsend, the top U.S. general in Africa, specifically warned China was pursuing bases on Africa's Atlantic coast.
Their first overseas military base, their only one, is in Africa, and they have just expanded that by adding a significant pier that can support even their aircraft carriers in the future. Around the continent, they're looking for other basing opportunities.
This could give the Chinese military direct access to the east coast of the United States. But there may not be much the U.S. can do about it. Equatorial Guinea is a former Spanish colony. It has a population of just 1.4 million people. It became independent in 1968, but since 1979, it's been ruled by the same man, President Teodoro Obiang. See, he says he's not a dictator, he's a president for 40 years. You know when you were a kid and your mom's boyfriend, Byron, said he isn't going to replace your dad, but then he moves in and suddenly you're not allowed to watch Bob's Burgers. It's like that, but for 40 years. You see, China doesn't mind dealing with presidents who never leave office. President Obiang and his family are extremely wealthy thanks to offshore gas and oil deposits, because of course they are. And Equatorial Guinea's natural resources and strategic location has made it a very interesting place for China. In fact, China helps train and arm the Equatorial Guinean police. And then there's all the investment, like the Chinese-built commercial port in Bata that they definitely knew could one day be a military base. This investment is part of China's Belt and Road Initiative. China gives out loans to countries with questionable leadership to build infrastructure. And as General Townsend warned, that infrastructure sometimes ends up in China's hands.
China, however, is of great concern. They are literally everywhere on the continent. They're placing a lot of bets down. They're spending a lot of money. We know they use debt trap diplomacy, coercion with corrupt politicians. They build a lot of critical infrastructure, and so most of their competition is through economic means, building infrastructure and trapping African countries in bad loans that give the Chinese access to that infrastructure.
It's like if your friend gave you a PS5, but only if they can come over to your apartment to play it whenever they want. And then, 6 months of gaming sessions later, you realize they've been sleeping on your couch and started calling you roomie. That's why China has built so many commercial ports. Chinese state-owned companies have built 100 commercial ports around Africa in the past 2 decades, according to Chinese government data. That's a lot of apartments for them to potentially crash in. And China has at least considered turning some of them into military bases. In a report to Congress this year, the Pentagon said China has likely considered African bases in Kenya, Seychelles, Tanzania, and Angola. But since U.S. intelligence knows this, and knows the risk, surely they're on top of the situation, right? Well, it's not going so great. I'll tell you why after the break. Welcome back. So the U.S. has known about China's military ambitions in Equatorial Guinea since at least 2019. Trump sent a senior Pentagon official there in the later days of his administration. Recently, the Biden administration also sent a top U.S. official, who said, as part of our diplomacy to address maritime security issues, we have made clear to Equatorial Guinea that certain potential steps involving Chinese activity there would raise national security concerns. Yeah. Certain potential steps. Very diplomatic. Just like when my bookie told me he'd take certain potential steps with my teeth if I didn't pay him the money I owe him. Of course, there's a small problem that makes it challenging for the U.S. to deal with Equatorial Guinea. The State Department has accused the Obiang regime of extrajudicial killings, forced disappearances, torture, and other abuses. And the U.S. Justice Department has accused Obiang of amassing a fortune through corruption and money laundering. This is what gives China leverage. The Chinese Communist Party loves corruption and money laundering. That's practically the party's middle name. The Chinese Communist Corruption and Money Laundering Party. Okay, that's a little long. And extrajudicial killings, forced disappearances, and torture, those are the party's nickname, Twitter handle, and Xbox gamer tag. The U.S. doesn't like those things, and publicly criticizes Equatorial Guinea for it. But the U.S. does have some leverage that might make Obiang think twice about letting China set up a military base on the Atlantic. I mentioned that Equatorial Guinea has lots of offshore oil and gas. That's why Obiang and his family are so rich, and why the country is the richest on the sub-Saharan mainland, at least by per capita GDP. Well, Equatorial Guinea relies on American oil companies to extract those resources. There's also a big problem with pirates and illegal fishing. The U.S. has offered to help, and beyond that, the U.S. is actively trying to sweeten relations. Earlier this year, what appeared to be an accidental ammunition explosion leveled an army base near Bata. The U.S. offered aid. The same month, Equatorial Guinean troops participated in U.S.-led naval exercises in the Gulf of Guinea. In August, an American Navy ship anchored off the Bata port, and the captain invited local officials and naval personnel aboard to observe firefighter training. But it's like the old saying goes, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him ally with you against the Chinese Communist Party. At the end of October, Obiang had a call with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. And according to Chinese state-run media, Obiang said he has always regarded China as its most strategic partner. So, we'll see about that Chinese military base. And this episode is sponsored by PC Doctor Toolbox. Computer and software crashes, hardware failures, and general computer slowdowns are way too common. And they can come up during the worst times, like during a business meeting or when you're traveling away from home and your IT person isn't around. If you're concerned about the health of your computer and want tools to prevent these kinds of untimely system issues, you should be using PC Doctor Toolbox. Stop crashes before they happen. And we have a special 50% off discount just for China Uncensored viewers. Use the link and coupon code below to take advantage of this limited time offer. I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.